In Germany, rationalism appeared as an ally of religion, but she soon realized that the dogmatic side of religion was incapable of demonstration. The only course open to her was to eliminate dogma from the sacred record. With the elimination of dogma came the utilitarian view of morality. And thus, rationalism completed the reign of unbelief. So we had discussed until this point. Now, today we'll start with such was the state of theological thought in Germany when Kant appeared. His critique of pure reason revealed the limitations of human reason and reduced the whole work of the rationalist to a heap of ruins. So his critique of pure reason revealed the limitations of human reason and reduced the whole work of the rationalists to a heap of ruins. The misunderstanding of Kant is one of the most glaring aspects of reconstructions of religious thought in Islam, and people have been reading Kant in the subcontinent anyway, in the light of these remarks ever since. And I can understand why Iqbal comes to these conclusions. If you were trained as a Hegelian of a sort, then it is natural, it is understandable that you'll focus on critique of pure reason, and you'll focus on Kant's limitations of human reason, because that's what basically Hegel denied and contested in Kant on the Kantian basis. So he sort of radicalized Kant and denied that human reason has any limitations as such, and the limitations are basically historical. And history for Hegel is basically the saga of reason overcoming those limitations. But for understanding modernity, this is disastrous or catastrophic, because you can't really understand metaphysical or side of or the foundations of modernity without understanding Kant properly. And this Hegelian understanding of Kant is obviously partial and also partial and so not correct. So we are going to look at this and see how we can try to overcome this. So let's just spend some time on this sentence. His critique of pure reason revealed the limitations of human reason and reduced the whole work of rationalists to the heap of ruins. So let's take the easier part first. So rejection of rationalism. So as we saw in detail in previous video, critique of pure reason is not just a rejection of rationalism. It's a rejection of part of rationalism, but it's also a rejection of part of empiricism. In effect, Kant saw it as a response to the Humean critique of rationalism. And what he thought was, you have to take some of his critique and revise rationalism in the light of that. So in a sense, we can say that critique of pure reason is a response to Hume and revision of rationalism in the light of the Humean or the empiricist critique of rationalism, which involved giving some ground to Hume, but also reformulating rationalism in a way in which it was no longer amenable to the Humean attack. And that's why Kant, that's important, describe critique of pure reason as an apology for Leibniz. So if it is at least in part an apology for Leibniz, we can't at the same time claim that it reduced the whole work of rationalists to a heap of ruins. This sort of thing never happened in philosophy anyway, because rationalists will have been always there and will be there, and empiricists have been always there and will be there. It's something which you can't have a clear-cut answer to or rejection of, because these things are based on metaphysical presupposition about which we can't have a final answer. Okay, so this is the second part, but now let's move to the first part of the sentence, which is more important from our viewpoint. So Iqbal says that Kant's pure reason critique of pure reason, revealed the limitations of reason. Now, the basic problem here is two. One is the word limitations. So Kant's critique of pure reason doesn't reveal the limitations of reason. What it does is limits of reason, and there's a huge difference between limitations and limits, in a sense, which because limits is a technical term in a sense. So in fact, he puts limits on pure reason in order to overcome the reason's limitations. Overcome. So it's totally opposite of what he is saying here. And what he is the second thing is not limits, or not limitations, but limits, and not of reason as such, but only theoretical reason. And as I said, he puts limits on theoretical reasons in order to overcome the limitations of reason as such, reason as a whole. And that's a totally different from what Paul is saying here. And I have explained this before, but I'll explain just a bit more here how Kant's how Kant do this, how he puts limits on reason in order to avoid the limitations of reason. So how does Kant's notion of limits of pure reason limits of pure reason amount to overcoming the limitations of reason rather than overcoming the limitations of reason rather than establishing the limitations of reason. Kant has famously said at the start of Critique of Pure Reason that he had to let me get the exact quote. This here. Thus, I cannot even assume this. The preface to his second edition, which is normally referenced as B. Thus, I cannot even assume God, freedom, and immortality for the sake of the necessary practical use of my reason. I'll come back to practical use of reason in a minute. Unless I simultaneously deprive speculative reason, that is theoretical reason, of its pretension to extravagant insights. So these are limits of theoretical reason he wants to. So thus I cannot even assume. So if he doesn't deny, if he doesn't limit pure reason, then he would have to deny freedom, immortality, and God, which are essential for his conception of reason, as we will see. So thus I cannot even assume freedom and immortality, God, freedom, and immortality for the sake of the necessary practical use of my reason, unless I simultaneously deprive speculative reason of its pretension to extravagant insights. So he has to limit speculative reason and theoretical reason in order to assume God, freedom, and immortality. Like assume meaning the keep the space open for them, because in order to attain to such insight, speculative reason would have to help itself to principles that in fact reach only to the objects of possible experience, and which, if they were to be applied to what cannot be an object of possible experience, then they would always actually transform it into an appearance, and thus declare all practical extension of pure reason important. Again, this is very important, practical extension of pure reason. So basically he is limiting theoretical pure reason, theoretical use of reason, in order to safeguard the practical use of reason, or pure practical reason, as we'll see in a minute. In fact, he establishes in Kant system practical reason. Theoretical reason is actually subservient to practical reason, as we'll see in a minute. And then his main famous line, thus I had to deny knowledge, which means that's pure reason, in order to make room for faith. That is faith in freedom, faith in practical reason. So when he talks about faith, knowledge in order to make room for faith. What you mean is faith and practical reason. I'll explain this in a. So he said he had to deny knowledge. That is pure reason or theoretical reason. Theoretical reason. In order to make room for freedom or practical reason. In fact, as we'll see in a minute, if there is no freedom, in fact, there is no knowledge as well, like theoretical knowledge. That's why when he's saying he has to deny knowledge in order to make room for faith, in fact, what he's saying is I had to deny knowledge. That is, limit its pretensions in order to safeguard knowledge itself. And how is this the case? I'll show you in a minute. Very briefly, for Kant, knowledge is basically consists of two parts. It's very rough. Intuition and concepts. So intuitions provide us with information, and information comes through senses, and they are passive. So they receive from outside these impressions. So our intuitions are through our senses, and senses are passive in the sense that they just record what they receive from outside. But these impressions are not knowledge yet. In order to become knowledge, they have to combine with concepts. They're two things. We have to have concepts in this, and not just empirical concept, because empirical concepts themselves require pure concepts and the activity of the subjects. So these impressions which we receive through intuition, they are received through senses. They are intuition, but they are not knowledge yet. They have to combine with concepts. So these concepts are provided by our reason or understanding. Okay, and so that's one thing. So you have a reason has to provide these concepts in order for these concepts to combine with intuition to become knowledge. That's Kant's concept. But the subject of knowledge, or subject of reason, does not only have to provide concept, but it has to combine those concepts with these intuition. So this act of combination, which is an activity, that is spontaneity. So in that sense, it's total opposite of intuition, because intuitions are totally impassive, totally passive. There's no action involved in there. We're just like, it's like mirror, you're just reflecting what is coming through outside. On the other hand, concepts are generated through activity of reason. So that's pure activity. And you need concept, but you also need to combine these passive impressions with these concepts in order. So this activity of combination requires an active subject. It requires spontaneity. And that spontaneity must be outside knowledge, otherwise I'll just come in a minute. It won't be spontaneity anymore, because for this reason, because knowledge is the combination of intuition and concepts. Combination. Knowledge is combination. So that's what the combination is being with this plus symbol here. So that's knowledge. So knowledge itself is presupposing here activity. That is spontaneity. That is freedom. In two aspects. First, it's providing us with concepts, because we don't get those concepts from experience. And secondly, and more importantly, this combination is, without this combination there would be no knowledge. So it means knowledge actually requires this freedom, and we need to limit knowledge in order to keep this freedom intact, and in order to indirectly keep the knowledge intact. So it's not just you have to deny knowledge in order to keep freedom, yes, but you had to deny knowledge in order to keep knowledge intact as well. So and why you have to deny knowledge in order to keep freedom? And here is the simplistic reason for these. And the simplistic reason is, I mean, not simplistic, but like I'm explaining it in a simple way. One of the concepts which a reason must provide or apply to sense impressions in order to create knowledge is concept of cause and effect, for example. So whenever we have knowledge, we have a concept of cause and effect. And cause and effects for Kant are deterministic in the way of the mechanical philosophy of Newton and 1890s. So it means that all our knowledge is causal and deterministic. It means within the domain of knowledge there is no freedom. So in order to have the concept of freedom, and consequently in order to have knowledge, we have to have limits of knowledge and limits of where cause and effect can be applied. And that limit is provided by Kant's rule that concepts apply only to impressions of senses. And not to things which we can't possibly experience. So that's why the concept, including concept of cause and effect, doesn't apply to God. Doesn't apply to our own self either, our transcendental self. which we have no knowledge of, because if we had knowledge, then this self wouldn't have freedom and knowledge would not even be possible. But this self is beyond impression. We can never experience this self, our own self, because whenever we try to experience it, it jumps out of that circuit, because in order to have any experience, we need this I. So that's how he denies or limits theoretical knowledge in order to provide the space for freedom, to provide the space for knowledge, etc. And Kant is clear in his critique that this I think, sort of Cartesian I think, transcendental I think, which we don't experience, which we can't experience, because if we experience that, and the part of I think which we experience, it is already part of our knowledge, so it is not the part of our activity. But for every knowledge presupposes activity. So I think, so whenever I try to think myself, the part of which I'm thinking comes part of my phenomenal knowledge, but the original I think sort of jump out, because that original I think is needed to produce that knowledge. And Kant recognizes this in his critique of pure reason. Let me catch the quotation where he says that. This is a quotation. He said, "The I thing must be able to accompany all my representations. For otherwise something would be represented in me that could not be thought at all." I'll explain it in a minute. Which is as much as to say that the representation would either be impossible or else at least would be nothing for me. That representation that can be given prior to all thinking is called intuition. Thus, the manifold of intuition has a necessary relation to I think in the same subject in which this manifold is to be encountered. But this representation is an act of spontaneity, that is freedom. It cannot be regarded as belonging to sensibility, because otherwise knowledge would not be possible. I call it a pure a perception in order to distinguish it from empirical one, or also originally a perception, since it is that self-consciousness which, because it produces the representation, I think, which must be able to accompany all other, and which in all consciousness is one and the same, cannot be accompanied by any further representation. It's original, it's transcendental, it's spontaneity, pure spontaneity. I also call it the unity, the transcendental unity of self-consciousness, in order to designate the possibility of a priori cognition from the manifold representation that are given in a certain intuition would not altogether be my representation if they did not altogether belong to a self-consciousness, that is my representations. Even if I am not conscious of them as such, they must yet necessarily be in accord with the condition under which alone they can stand together in a universal self-consciousness, because otherwise they would not throughout belong to me. From this original combination much may be inferred. So it's an enigmatic and mysterious passage, but what it's saying is basically this: if knowledge is passivity plus combination of actively generated concepts, so in order to be this knowledge be my knowledge, must be referred to me as pure a generator of pure activity, because otherwise this will not be combined. It needs activity, pure activity. Now this pure activity must be a unity as well. It's the source must be a unity, a self, a subject, me. Because otherwise it would be not my knowledge. It won't be combined in a way that but this me can never become part of knowledge, because knowledge is passivity and this is pure activity. And if we actually can experience me, uh, then knowledge would not be possible. Freedom would not be possible, because the realm of knowledge is the realm of phenomena, is the realm of determination, it is the realm of cause and effect, it's the realm of the natural world, this me. Now we can't prove this because we never experience this me, because whenever we experience anything we need this me outside that experience, otherwise that experience is not knowledge. But we can feel, whenever we try to think of that I think jump out of that gaze, so to speak. And also we can prove that through transcendental argument, that knowledge would not be possible without activities, and that activity must be unity. So this is Kant's transcendental argument. So these are the two reasons he had to limit knowledge in order to provide room for faith. Or what he mean by faith is faith in freedom, faith that I am not just part of the phenomenal deterministic kingdom, but I am also a part of original spontaneity, part of kingdom of end, part of the realm of freedom, which is totally opposite to the realm of nature, because nature is deterministic, it is passive, while this realm is active. And this realm is what relates me to God, because God is freedom as well. So as a free person, I am actually in communion with God. In a sense, I am as Kant says, analogous, as analogous to the divinity. As analogous to the divinity, because in my freedom, I'm analogous to divinity. And in a sense, that was just repetition of what his master Leibniz had said, that we our own sphere, we as humans are little divinities. So let's go back to Iqbal's passage, and I'll stop here and continue with this next time. Iqbal to get it totally wrong, totally wrong in the sense that he's in Germany, rationalism appeared as an ally of religion, but she soon realized blah blah blah. With the elimination of dogma came the utility, and thus rationalism completed the reign of unbelief. Such was the state of theological thought in Germany when Kant appeared. His critique of pure reason revealed the limitations of human reason and rendered the whole work of rationalists to the heap of ruin. So first thing we said was, no, rationalism, part of his project was to actually provide an apology for rationalism. The second thing is, critique of pure reason did not reveal the limitation of human reason. It revealed the limits of human reason in order to overcome the limitations of human reason. And he found it, so he limits the theoretical reason in order to provide overcome the limits of practical reason, that is, in order to prove the transcendental freedom for human beings, in order to prove that human beings are godlike creatures who have this absolute freedom, at least in their transcendental aspects, which makes them workers with God, analogous to the divinity, the little divinity. So he wasn't doing anything remotely comparable to what Iqbal is saying, and his that's one of the lecture of Iqbal's thought here is, and in order not to understand Kant is not to understand modernity or misunderstand modernity. So that's it. We'll pick this up, this same sentence, and then we'll continue on in the next video.